Hello and welcome to the practical session of group policy management. In this video, we are only going to explore group policy management. Try to understand how the interface is like, what are some of the key things you need to be familiar with. And then in the subsequent videos I'll follow up, we'll be creating the policy and we'll be troubleshooting things to do with group policy, right? So whenever you're on a server and you want to get into group policy, group policy can be opened in two ways. You can open it from the server manager, and how to open the server manager is to go to the start menu and open the server manager. Sometimes when you log onto the server by default, the server manager opens on its own. And then to find the group policy management, you go to tools and you have a list of all the services that are available on this server. And you can see we have group policy management here. You can see that we have local security policy as well. So the keywords here are policy. The difference between the local security policy is you can configure things that you would have done in group policy, but whenever you do it here, it's only applicable to this machine itself, which is the server. But with group policy, that's when you want to create a policy that affects the entire organization. So you can open group policy from here, or you can just go to your start menu, type in GPO, and type in group policy and type in group policy management, which is a desktop app. So you can open it from here or go to tools. I normally like to go with the tools. So I'm just going to open that, and this is the group policy. I'm just going to minimize this and keep this in the background. So in the group policy management, so this is the group policy management MMC, the snap-in, you'd realize that it has a layout that is familiar with how Active Directory users and computers looks like. I'm just going to compare that side by side. So you see the interface looks the same. You have in Active Directory, you have the forest, and then you have the OUs and the containers. And it's like for like. You see, they even have the same command tabs, right? But in group policy, you have the forest, and then you have the domains, and then you're now having to look at something that looks more like the way the Active Directory root is like. I'm just going to close this and come in here. Now, you have sites as well, and this is when you're trying to manage different sites that are connected to your domain. Now, when you go to your forest, which is in our context, extracia.local, you'd realize that we have the same OUs that we normally kind of OU like the way it appears in Active Directory. That's how I want to put it. Pardon me. So we have some of the OUs are created: ICT department, finance department, developers department, and the thing is, it's not like when you go into this, you're going to show you who are the members. No. These are just structural containers that you can apply policies to. Now, at the moment, we are in the extracia.local domain, which is our forest. You'd realize that there is a default domain policy right underneath extracia.local. And the placement of this policy means that whatever configurations is done here applies to everything within the extracia.local domain. So hence it's called default domain policy. When you go to default domain policy, it gives you some more information about what the policy contains. We have the scope tab, which gives you information of its reach, who are the users that can edit this, and what is it impacting. So you see it's impacting the whole directory, the whole domain, which is extracia.local, and it's linked, and it gives you other options, some other tabs like the details tab that gives you information about when it was created. Obviously this would have been created by default when we installed Active Directory in the couple of videos before when we're setting up the lab. You can see the date, and at the moment it has a default status as enabled. The settings tab gives you what are the policy configurations that exist within this policy. So I'm just going to make this bigger. Now, at the moment, you'd realize that we have three sections. We have general, computer configuration, and user configuration. You can see that this is like very blank and there's not a lot of information in there. There's not a lot of configurations that are showing up because it's out of the box. So the general tab normally just gives you information about most of the things that are in this tab, like the details. It tells you when it was created, the links, its reach, where it's applied to, and security filtering will give you, settings in which groups and which users are going to be impacted by this, who can use this, who can edit this, and who does this impact, more of the things like that. And it's basically affecting authenticated users. So any user that has a user account that is being authenticated on the domain would have that policy applied. So that's all for the general. More information on the computer configuration. So every policy has two factions. You can modify a policy to target things that you want to change on a user computer or things that you want to change from a user perspective. So in, say, computer configuration, you have policies and you have Windows settings, you have security settings, and we would understand most of these when we go into exploring creating a new policy or trying to modify a policy. And when you go to user configuration at the moment, there's no settings defined at the moment. So when you go into the policy, you can add some configurations for users that would impact users. Now, I just expanded the security settings on the computer configuration, which has certain things like account policies, password policy, things like this that are computer related. So when you're going to log on onto a computer in the very first place, you turn on the machine, there are certain policies that you can configure that can manage a user and how the user interacts with the computer, the likes of that. Now, delegation only gives information about what users have access to modify this domain policy, which is a default domain policy. This, whoever is in this group can read. Whoever is in these groups have custom permissions that can do specific things. The system itself can do everything. So most of the system automated things that will happen in the back end would have this permission. And authenticated users have only read permissions, which is only needed for them for their policies to be applied to them. Now, if you realize that there is a container here called group policy object that basically just contains all the policies that you've created in this domain. It's just a container that lists if you want to have a folder, a container that has every policy that you have created, you can see that all these OUs are closed. They might be having custom domain policies in them, and to find them, you might have to expand all of them. But then if you're feeling lazy to expand them, you can just go to this container and it will tell you all the list of group policies that are in this environment. You can see that there is two policies here. We have the default domain controller and default domain policy. We can already see the default domain policy. We know where it is, but where is the other one? So that should tell you that there's another domain policy that's hiding somewhere, and at least it should tell you that it exists, and it's up to you to know where it is. So for instance, it says default domain controller policy. So it would obviously be applied to the domain controller's OU. So when I expand this, voila, there's the policy. But these are policies that are created out of the box, and we need to explore and understand how to go about creating policies. So when we go about that, then we can now understand what are some of those configurations that we have been talking about all this while, that the group policies use to create configurations and settings that can be applied to people within the organization. When I say apply to people within the organization, that's why we have this OUs that are showing up here. So finance department, ICT department. In Active Directory, these OUs will have users within them. So that would mean that if you have a domain policy that's created and applied to these OUs, it means whoever is a user in that OU would have that policy applied to their account. So I'll see you in the next video where we are going to create a custom domain policy, and in that process we'll understand what are some of the things that can be changed, what are some of the various settings that it gives you access to modify. I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.